So, just to let people know, this is my speech.
All right.
Yeah, I'm ready here. Everybody in the audience is going to look at this and say, well, we're in for a short ride. Guess what? Probably not. There's an enormous amount to talk about briefly in the University of Solar in Minnesota. You all have been a part of this ride for many years, and I'm just going to go back 1 year. How many of you were in the audience? It was almost a year ago when I laid out what we thought we were going to be able to achieve in the legislative session in 2013. Okay, well, that's really gratifying. Glad that you were here. I'm going to review some of that because, to a certain extent, even I find it kind of remarkable. At that time, I'm going to put this out here for people. There was a rally today, for Move Minnesota. There's a huge transportation bill that's going through the session, and everybody in the transportation advocacy community was so gratified that we were done. That they didn't have to compete with us because I just came from that rally. I'm not going to put anybody down. We had 5 times the people in the rotunda last year with the governor. We rocked that place. And, we're going to support these folks because it's all part of the equation for sustainability. And, keep track of what's going on with the transportation bill. It's really critical for, the whole suite of clean energy policies that are going forward.
I heard those solar people were sucking up the band of the entire apple. The band all itself.
It's pretty amazing, and I know a lot of you were at the event last Friday. There were 400 people at the University of St. Thomas. It wasn't just the numbers, it was the energy, the vitality that was in the room. I mean, we're just continuing to show people how incredible the solar universe, the solar market is in the state of Minnesota. I'll get back to last year. Let's see. What I did was I put up here, as a matter of fact, on a flip chart, they said there were going to be a number of things that we were going to get. An SES, Solar Energy Standard. Wasn't quite sure what the number was going to be, but predicted we were going to get a number. We were going for 10% by 2030. We got 1.5% by 2020. You can say we compressed, we made a compromise. We put the ramp a lot steeper, but we compromised on the number. What's that number translates to? 450 megawatts of distributed and some utility scale solar. Anybody think that's a big deal? It's huge. It's huge. What else did we get? I talked about we were going to get something that a lot of people have been engaged with, but maybe not so much in this room. Value of solar. I'm going to come back to this. Talked about community solar gardens. We were going to get something with that. We were going to get some improvements with Made in Minnesota, solar rewards. And I said we're going to get a bunch of other things. I'm going to talk about that maybe even first. Do any of you know how many other pieces of the bill we got? How many studies? We got a study in on-site stored energy. We got a study on solar thermal. We got a study on a carbon fossil fuel free energy grid, state economy. We got a study on energy efficiency. What else? There's one other, I'm forgetting it right now. But, you know, the point of this is that we didn't just go in and say we wanted to get this for this year and for even the next couple of years. We were setting the stage for the next 10 years, the next 5 years. We were saying, okay, we want to be able to justify expanding solar thermal in our state. We want to be able to justify energy storage expansion in our state. We wanted to be able to put our whole process of developing solar into a clean energy context. We weren't just saying, okay, let's just focus on solar narrowly. But solar is a part of a clean energy economy that's developing and has all these different elements. Now, don't get me wrong. The transmission study. I always forget that. So we have 5 pretty significant studies. To set the stage, to lay the groundwork for what we want to be able to do with different aspects of the clean energy economy, not just solar, going forward. That's one of the reasons that we were successful last year, is that people who were involved with wind supported us because we supported the study for transmission and integration, that's really critical to growing the overall renewable energy standard. We're going to come back and support in 2015. We were able to get the support of people who do energy efficiency because we supported a really significant stakeholder process that the DER convened and is already completed for energy efficiency, not just for residential, but for commercial and industrial entities in the state. We were able to get support from other elements of the clean energy jobs universe because we supported what's important to them, not just what's important to solar. I wanted to make that point because I think that's one of the things that was transformational about the last session. And I want to use that term a lot because there are a lot of people that looked at what Minnesota got this last session and they go, wow, you guys did a lot with solar. And my response to them is, yeah, we did a lot with solar, but guess what? We did a lot with clean energy in this state, and that's one of the reasons that we were able to do as much and were able to get that big lift for solar, is that there were a lot of other people that felt like we were lifting them at the same time. So it's not silo politics, it's transformational politics. What about these separate issues? Solar energy standard, I think everybody kind of understands that you got to have that. It's a mandate. There are a lot of people, including utilities, that get a little bit uneasy, hesitant, outright resistant. What's the right word? Hostile. Something called a mandate. But you know what? It's a good business signal. It's a good market demand signal. We needed to have it, and it's one of the reasons that we're going to be able to move forward in our state. There are a lot of people that understand now. Here's the magic in what we did, and the transformational piece of this is that we looked at 3, maybe 4 different market segments. We could have just said, and I'm going to be as gracious as I can be about this. There were some people in the environmental movement that were like, and they were supportive. They were part of our team. They did a lot of heavy lifting in this process. But there are a number of them that just said, go get the 450 megawatts. It doesn't matter where it comes from. It doesn't matter whether you protect residential and small commercial. It doesn't matter if you have a mid-range commercial. And our position was, yes, it does. That's a really important part. That's an important issue for us. And we are going to do policy by design. That's one of the reasons that the SES is not just a number. It's 3 different market segments. There's a carve-out for small, residential, and commercial. Anybody everybody here. I'm going to start doing a little bit more interactive stuff because, I love to just talk, but, it doesn't hurt to have people. I'm going to do some quizzing. Some people you probably know this. What's the carve out for small residential and commercial? Anybody?
10 kilowatt.
It's 10%. But that's about right. It's 20 kilowatts for solar rewards, and it's 40 kilowatts per unit for a baby Minnesota. It's going to probably break out somewhere in the range of 70 megawatts for small residential and commercial, something like 100 megawatts. It could go as high if we're successful as 150 megawatts for community solar gardens, and the remainder is going to be utility scale. That's pretty cool. It's not like we just said, let's just go out there and do everything that's utility scale. Get it done, be done in 6 months, a year. But there are all these different market segments that we consciously design into our bill. That's having a huge impact on people around the country. Because there are a lot of people that call, NCIA or the state and say, what's happening with the mid-range? Because that's what they do. What's happening with utility scale? What's happening with residential? So we're in the process right now of attracting the entire market to Minnesota. Minnesota now is a growing market in 3 different segments. It's a big deal. It's not just that we have one number here. We consciously design a policy to grow 3 different market segments. This is probably the most exciting. How many of you read the news about what happened with the PUC yesterday? Big time. Thumbs up. Everybody give yourselves applause. Everybody. I'm serious. That was a big lift. And it's not done yet. When I get to the point that we got to yesterday, very, very significant event. Okay, that's correct. What happened was that the Public Utilities Commission, based on our law, had to make a decision on a methodology that had been developed by the Division of Energy Resources, essentially saying this is going to be the formula that all of the utilities must use if they're going to use the value of solar methodology or value of solar tariff. And they approved the Division of Energy Resources methodology yesterday and essentially said, this is it, this is the methodology. Now, all you utilities, go out there, take your data and put those formulas to work and come back to us within 30 days with the number. So, is that number going to be 14 cents a kilowatt hour? Is it going to be, we think it's going to be in that range, at least what we sell, 14 to 15 cents, but it could be a little lower, it could be a little higher, we don't know.
I think, if I remember rightly, some major utilities were challenging this solar energy requirement and wanted it overturned. I read something about that.
Well, yeah, they don't want the 1.5%, and there's been some contention over the different elements. We can get real deep into the weeds fast if we want, but I want to try to get past some of the specific elements about line loss, how you figure the savings that you get from solar because you don't have line loss, transmission and distribution, costs that are deferred because you have solar, peak energy capacity that you no longer have to put on the margins because now you have solar. Anyway.
And it usually approved.
What?
So I think they would have legislature passed now and passed the PUC.
Well, the legislature got DER to do this process. Division of Energy Resources went through a really extensive stakeholder process that many people in this room from MRES and other organizations participated in. They took all of those comments into account, plus some written commentary, and then essentially took that information, pooled it, and came out with what I call a stack of value components that when you put it together, in its summation is a value of solar rating. Well, what's transformational about that? I'm just going to throw that question out there. It may seem like too big a question, but what are some of the reasons why this is such a big deal? Not just that it happened yesterday, but we're the first state to do a value of solar tariff, a value of solar rate. Why is that such a big deal?
I don't know the answer to that question, but maybe I'm off track here. About 5 years ago, Ellen Anderson, kind of spearheaded the renewable energy standard, along with some other people. And how does that tie into all this and whatever happened to that? Because that was supposed to be 15% by 2015, 20% by 2020, and so forth. And it seemed like, no pun intended, but it all got sucked up by wind. A lot of that. And how does that tie into what we're doing today? And give us maybe a little background of where this kind of started.
Well, let's be clear. I don't know how many of you were in the room when I talked about Bill Hilty, on Friday. But he was chair of the Energy Committee in the House for many, many years. And it's on his shoulders and Ellen Anderson's shoulders that the solar energy standard and a lot of what we got done, rests. So, there is no, I can't say enough, sunrises and sets, so to speak, on those two folks and a lot of other people that have done some heavy lifting over the years. The renewable energy standard, you're right, is basically a wind standard, and that's one of the reasons why this is not a carve-out. It's a solar energy standard. It's not 1.5% of the 25% by 2030. So, it's a big deal. I didn't mention that, but you're right. There were some questions about that. Wind friends were like, well, can't you just do a carve-out? Can't you just kind of slide yours in here, along with us? And, there's enough room in the renewable energy market for both of us. Now, next session, we may have that discussion again, and we'll see how that goes. But, this is not a carve-out. This is a standalone standard for solar, and it's one of the reasons why it's such a big deal and why it got so much notoriety around the country and around the world. You guys didn't just slide this in, to the overall renewable energy standard and try to carve out a piece of this that they're not doing for solar. This is standard. The value of solar tariff, I'm going to ask that question again. Why is that such a big deal? Jan?
Well, before we had that, all energy got thrown in the same basket, and people were like, that dirty energy is worth the same as clean energy. Now we have that opportunity to put the value on clean energy.
Yep, I think that's a really good answer. Looking for some other stuff. I expected you, Jan, to just hit it out of the park completely. You got the third base.
So it's a social cost of carbon in that.
That's right. There's a whole set of values. What's happened is that in the discussion about solar, and we're not unique in this respect, but in the discussion about solar, it's always been about the cost. How often have you heard, solar's too expensive, it's too costly, it has these, yada yada. This is a discussion about the value of solar. This is a discussion about the benefits that are quantified for the utility, for ratepayers. This is a rate. This is not an incentive. It's a really big difference. And it means it's part of a whole other protocol called, it's not really buy all, sell all, it's a bill credit rate. But you've got two meters. One that meter is the consumption that you pay. It allows the utilities to get their fixed costs and their revenue, and another meter that's a production meter. And it's on that meter that you're being paid a rate to produce solar that is beneficial, that is calculated as a value of solar, as a benefit to the utilities, and they will pay that rate because they believe that rate is quantifiable, measurable benefit to them. That's a whole shift. Like, that's a whole nother discussion that has not happened except in a few municipal utility situations around this country. I'm not trying to make too big a deal out of it because I don't think it's possible to make too big a deal out of it. You know, this is a big deal.
Are you talking about we're heading towards a fifth, maybe? An FIT?
Well, I'm going to be careful because I'm on videotape. The answer is yes. But we're not yet.
It is. Okay.
What this is not a feed-in tariff in the way that it has been configured in the past. I mean, we look around, you know, at best practices and realize, and not just feed-in tariff, but aspects, you know, because there's some real, trying to find the right word, somebody can help me with this. Yeah, it does happen once in a while, I can't find the right word. But there's some experimentation. There's you know, people that are kind of going out there and they're saying, where do we need to fix the price so that the market will work? And they're guessing. Yeah, you know, it's an informed guess. You know what I'm saying? It's not like they're just totally, you know, pulling this out or whatever. But you know, it's still not rational. Well, what if you went through the process with the utilities and decided rationally what were all the different components that value solar? And you developed a rate based on that. That's what we do. That's what we're doing. So, you know, there are a lot of people, including myself, that don't use the word feed-in tariff. You know, but, you know, truth be told, it has some of those characteristics. Yeah.
Well, a good example we talked about what happened in Spain a few years back when the feed-in tariff was arbitrarily set too high. I mean, they didn't think it was too high when they did it. What happened is, so to speak, broke the bank. The government couldn't afford to pay it anymore. Next day, like 20,000 people are out of work. Well, you know, that does more damage than good if it gets too high.
Well, and you look at the SREX markets, you know, all over the country, you know, where they set the alternative compliance payment, you know, maybe we're into the weeds of this stuff. You know, I love talking about this, but, you know, you can stop me and just say, you know, you don't need to go there. But it's more guesswork, you know, trying to figure out how to set something that is going to incentivize the market. You know, what we did was say, we're not going to do an incentive, we're going to do a value solar. And we're going to stack together those quantifiable benefits to the utility and to ratepayers. So, you know, I don't want to malign anybody, but you heard one of the commissioners yesterday in sort of an ongoing line of confusion say, well, what about how's this going to cost? You know, ratepayers. You know, there was one point, it was almost years when, you know, Bill Grant said, finally, Commissioner, I don't understand your question. I mean, in other words, it was so, you know, disconnected from what we were doing, which was create a benefit, not a cost, but a benefit, you know, for ratepayers. And, you know, so that's why it's a big deal.
What do you think about the part of the law that says it has to be no less than retail rate in 3 years? I mean, in 3 years, could it go below retail rate? I mean, you think that? I asked Bill Grant that question last summer, and he said he didn't see how it was possible. But I'm not for sure.
Well, I mean, the cost of, here's the deal. You know, we're going to continue to adjust, with inflation, the rate, but we're also going to continue to adjust the rate because cost of solar is coming down. So where is that going to end up? I don't know. We have to be real. That there's a possibility that this sort of remain flat. In terms of, if it's 14 cents now, maybe in 4 years it will be 14.5 or 14 cents a kilowatt hour.
And is for a given installation, is it fixed for a term or could it vary?
Well, for those of you that it's adjusted for inflation and levelized. So you're going to come in with a rate that you're going to be able to predict, but it's based on doing an initial calculation about an inflation adjustment, and that was a really important win for us. Had we not gotten that, it would have been impossible for us to. Well, we would have never done any solar installations. I'll just be honest, because on a consumption meter, the utilities would have been able to constantly inflate the cost. And on the production meter, if we had been held constant without an adjustment, it would be, we would go to the banks and say, well, you fund depreciated value for solar, and they'd be like, go someplace else. We don't do business that way.
But I think Jim's question is, usually you get a 25-year contract in solar gardens, as you said. And with solar works, you would also get at least a 20-year contract. And then you get a rate that's wrapped into that and levelized for that contract. But what if you're not you're doing installations, not community solar gardens, not solar awards, not made in Minnesota? Now you're just taking whatever the market rate is. Right?
Yeah, I don't know, Jim. We held we said for 3 years it can't go below that floor. I don't think we're going to. I think the value of solar is going to be higher than the applicable retail rate, which is our floor. I could be wrong. It's a little bit different from community solar gardens because we factored in 2 and 3 pennies for SRECs. We're not doing that with the value of solar. There's a lot of discussion about the value of SRECs, solar renewable energy credits, in meeting yesterday in community solar gardens discussion, but it's currently not in the value stack. The value component stack for the value of solar. Actually, Mencia's position was we prefer to have outside of that, so we have the value stack and then have that added. If you call, we were trying to get essentially a separation, have the environmental value based on the social cost of carbon and the compliance and penalty issues that were involved with that, and then have the SRECs be a separate compliance and penalty process. There's an overlap, and what we said is they ought to be separated and have the SRECs value separate. Okay, sorry, I went there. Got in the weeds. Dustin?
Kate wanted to know legislation going in this year about solar.
Okay, let me finish up the last year. I'll get to it. There's some good stuff. Okay, community solar gardens. How many of you have been following that? You want me to get into that? It's a really big deal. It's a wonderful program that democratizes solar. It really gets us into the realm where, we're able to get solar to people that don't have access to it. Even though the sun shines on everybody, not everybody has good solar access. Only about 20% of homes and businesses, really are able to take advantage of solar. That's a pretty low number. So, if we're going to reach the vast majority of our population, get past that 20% threshold, how are we going to do that? Well, community solar gardens is the way we're going to do that. Now, there's some financing tweaks that make that even more attractive to people, but it's a great program. There are a lot of different pieces of this that we can talk about. It probably is going to open up third-party financing. There are a lot of people that aren't paying attention to that, but it's in the community solar gardens piece. Made in Minnesota. There were two things about that that were big. Well, let me start by saying, made in Minnesota is in and of itself an attractive element to Minnesotans. I mean, the fact that we oversubscribe for solar PV isn't just because people in Minnesota love solar PV. People in Minnesota love solar PV that's made in Minnesota. Follow what I'm saying? I mean, the Made in Minnesota piece is a conscious policy design to elevate the attraction of PV. And I said this at the conference last Friday, and somebody said, well, how come you guys aren't putting as much emphasis on solar thermal? And my response was, it's all right. No, we didn't put as much money in the pot, but we're saying the same thing about solar thermal. We want it to be made in Minnesota. And that's a pitch. That's a marketing tool that is going to drive people to those companies that are producing in Minnesota. And it's also going to pull people into Minnesota. So they're going to look at that and say, that's really smart. It's really smart. Now, the other thing we did is that we shifted away from nameplate capacity, and stayed based on that. It really isn't market driven. It doesn't encourage competition to a performance-based incentive, PBI. And we did the same with solar rewards. We shifted away from nameplate capacity to performance-based incentive. So, last year, about this time, I was in that position of one of those guys in baseball history that stood at the home plate and held his bats and we're going to hit the ball. Sure enough. With the assistance of an enormous number of people, the Solar Works campaign, Solar Works Minnesota campaign, is a huge coalition, and see it itself as a kind of coalition, with MRES. But we brought in a number of other partners, and I'll just be candid. Had the Clean Energy and Jobs campaign not wrapped us up into the work that they were doing, we probably would have gotten stuff done. It was, pardon me?
Tell people who that is.
It's largely communities of faith, a huge number of environmental activist organizations, Blue-Green Alliance, a lot of trade unions, other businesses. What do we now? Yeah, it was huge. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, people like Dustin and other people came to the Capitol and testified. And, frankly, I thought, Dustin did as good as anybody in talking about the business proposition, the jobs that would be created, for solar. And it was a really critical piece. People needed to hear that, and Dustin did a really good job of conveying that message to our elected officials. But, we knocked on every door. Mid-SEA couldn't have done it. Solar Works Minnesota, as big as we were at the time that we went into the session, couldn't have done it. We did it because we had enough horsepower, to literally go talk. I mean, when we went into any hearing, we knew what the votes were going to be. When it went to the floor, it's like we knew. Well, not exactly. There were like a couple of people that we were hoping wouldn't show up. So they wouldn't go.
There was a couple electeds we had to call back in, right?
Yeah, exactly. We had to go get them! Get them out of their offices! We need that one extra vote. And we did. But we had those people to go around and get them. And that's a really important thing. So I don't want to make this out to be, it was all NCA and MRES. As important as our work was. The other thing that I want to say is that, and I said this last Friday, this didn't just happen in 2013. This started in 2010. we did some more work in 2011. I'm going to just be honest, and maybe a little crude, got our asses kicked in 2012. I mean, there were some really ugly hearings that I was in. Now, the good news is that in 2013, when some of those people that were saying less than generous things from the other side of the aisle came out to me and said, it's really impressive. And one of the reasons I'm going to vote for it this year is because you were the only voice for clean energy that was at the table in 2012. Everybody else said, we're not going to even show up because we know it's going to be too difficult. You were there. You showed up. You made the case. You didn't win, but you were at the table. So, that's a lesson for all of us is stay in, and make it happen over a number of years. Bring in the allies that you need. You're going to be able to deliver them. Okay, let me look at my outline here. See, I told you I was trying to make sure this is all that's working. Okay. Implementation and what we're doing this year. I'm betting that Eric, Jan, Dustin, Jack, a number of people in the room, sorry if I left anybody out, could probably list all of the PUC dockets that we're in right now. How many would you estimate, Eric?
5 at least.
At least, I think the last time I counted, we were at 7.
Yeah.
But it's kind of hard to keep track of, and I'll list all of them. And many people in this room, kudos to Eric, who's been really working hard. And I think everybody in this room should know. Sent out if he would tell people that he's been really, really active in the hearings. Your testimony yesterday, I told you then, I thought was really compelling. I mean, it's always compelling when you agree with me and see it. It wasn't just that. But, the good news is that there is a voice. We didn't win this fight. We being advocates for the economic development benefit component. But we had a lot of support from the so-called cluster of environmental organizations, the ELBC, Environmental Law Practice Center, Fresh Energy, Isaac Walton League. Who else is in there? Son Edison. Well, they've been supportive of that. They actually weren't in that group. I don't believe that particular. IREC, yeah. And then MRES individually has submitted comments every time and supported the economic development component along with NCA. We didn't get it, but the door is open. I think Bill Grant's comments at the end yesterday were very clear that they're willing to consider that going forward. They didn't want to formally put in the decision as a formal placeholder, but he was clear that the door is open for that discussion going forward. And I can talk about that in particular, what that means. For the moment, I just want to thank Eric and MRES for their ongoing support all the way up to yesterday, and some really outstanding comments that were delivered. So anyway, what we're doing right now is implementation, and that's what I want to get across to people. And I want to have Jack Klemke introduce himself too and tell people the work that's going on in Congress and right now, because that's part of the implementation process. Is that we didn't just get some stuff going on with the PUC. There's a couple of new staff people that are now working with Congress, and I don't want to tease people. Jack, if you could just quickly introduce yourself and let people know what you're doing, I think it'd be really inspiring for folks.
Yeah.
My name is Jack Hunke. I'm a solar business advisor. I gotta say selfishly that one of the best things that came out of this legislation was probably a job for me. So I'm now with the Commerce Department. One of the things we're doing right now as part of this legislation is creating the value of the solar chain. We're trying to compile a list so that we can quantify all of the different businesses that are involved in solar throughout the state. We're looking at trying to quantify not only the revenue, but also the number of jobs that this legislation means to the state. So far, we've been able to come up with a list of about 365 different companies that are involved in the solar chain in some manner, whether that's Tier 1 through the original equipment manufacturers, their suppliers, wholesale distributors, all the installers, and then all the service, the finance, the legal, post-head legal. So it's a very significant list. It should be, hopefully everything goes good, be sending out a survey by the end of the month, everybody on that list, and hopefully that list will continue to grow as we start compiling. It's been difficult to get names on the list. Majority of them came from just business cards and contacts. It's just been a process of accumulating, but it's really cool. It's exciting.
Yeah, we're gonna dig into our supply chain and figure out how many jobs solar really represents. I mean, we've got some numbers that we've done. I mean, it's not the first time we've tried to do this, but we've got the capacity to really get some much more reliable numbers than maybe we've ever had before. I mean, by supply chain, just in case people don't understand what that means, I mean, Jason, runs a company called MRES, most people are aware of, and he's got a ton of people or a lot of businesses that supply, him with products and components and materials. It's identifying how many of those companies for all of the OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, like Jason's, are real, and then starting to work out. Go to the next tier and say, okay, how many people work for you? I mean, kind of a mundane example is that we know there's a company in Alexandria that makes pallets, and some of those pallets are used by solar stacks. Well, they obviously are not just a solar supplier, but a certain number of their workers are in a solar supply chain, and we're going to identify those. So it's going to take some digging, and we've got some really talented people like Jack that are going to be working to do that. And that's one of the upshots of this legislation. So I got about 10 minutes. I'm going to try to wrap up by answering the question, what do we do in this session? Let's see. There's a solar standardized permitting bill that I'm not sure is going to get heard next week. We've got a solar, it's called cost tracking bill. It's kind of transparency and cost, so we can track, the cost issue.
It's all DG.
Pardon?
It's all DG. It's not
Okay, good. That's even better.
generation.
Yeah, that's even better. There's a homeowner association bill that's going to be heard next Monday, 4 p.m. We're basically saying if you are a homeowner association, a condo, you have the right to determine how solar can be installed. You don't have the right to prohibit it. So, it's like, okay, you can set some standards, but you can't say no. So, that's going to be a big deal because we estimate that 1 in 5 citizens in Minnesota are homeowner associations. We're trying to get this market opened up. If we allow homeowner associations to say, you just categorically can't build solar, and there are going to be some adjustments. We've made some changes in our language according to the homeowner association, which we think are legitimate.
That sounds good, because I don't know the condo, but I'd rather nobody. Sorry, they get very controversial, so they can't keep them out of your condo building if you want to propose it.
That's what we'll be.
Enough.
Yeah.
And,
We may lose it. It may be that we run up against too much opposition. I think we figured it out, but we'll see. So those are three.
Lynn, on that sort, I think some homeowner associations are starting to take it on themselves now too. I'm speaking of some homeowners associations in Woodbury that have changed their minds about their rules and regulations that were written 25, 30 years ago, and they've gotten board members and people in there. So we can hit it at the grassroots end too.
Well, and that's a real hotbed of activity. You just mentioned Woodbury. There's been a lot of activity over the last few years of people in homeowner associations there running into trying to work through those challenges. Let's see what else. There's a on-bill repayment that we're supportive of. It's not quite as strong as we hope it would be. We're not initiating it. It's a bill that's being initiated by Center for Energy and Environment, CED. The people we work with, they're good folks. There's a couple of electric vehicle bills, that passed out of committee yesterday. Was the PUC? So there's one being carried by Frank Ornstein and a mirror bill by Republican Garofalo, and I think Julie Rosen is carrying that one in the Senate. So people know the names. We're definitely doing bipartisan stuff. It's not just Democrats. We're reaching out to Republicans who carry some of our bills, and they're doing it. So, anything else? Anybody going to watch this stuff here? Anything else? Oh, yeah. There's a couple of tax bills. There's a
Energy efficiency stuff.
yeah, there's one on energy efficiency. Well, I don't know if they stripped out the SB 2030 stuff out of that bill that CED was carrying, which is really disappointing. There was an incentive for energy efficiency for sustainable building standards in the state, and apparently that ran into too much opposition from the utilities. They just decided not to push that forward. There's a property tax bill that we'll probably support coming up next week as well. That totally exempts solar installations. Right now, Minnesota revenue only exempts the panels themselves, not the whole system. So we're going after property tax exemption for a whole system under that. Okay, so here's some time for questions, I think. I try to give people a chance to ask questions and provide some input already, but
You said something about thinking the community gardens legislation is going to get more attractive or implementation of it.
well, what I meant was that there's this bill that I just mentioned on bill repayment, utility on bill repayment. I think will make it easier to participate in community solar gardens because you won't have to come up with anything upfront, payment. The beauty of community solar gardens is that the cost of participating goes down to the level of what it costs to be a subscriber, and that's a lot less than what you'd have to pay if you were just going to try to buy the whole system yourself. However, $900, I don't know, I'm not trying to say what the cost is going to be, for a subscription. That may still be too steep, for some people. So is there a way to finance that? And if there is, that opens up the door for even more participation. Jack?
Kate was wondering if the value of solar plays any part in communities or the cost.
Oh, good. Yeah. Well,
Good question.
yeah, there's kind of we're trying to reshape the narrative about what happened with the co-ops communities this last session, they didn't play very well, with us. Some of that's our fault because we didn't early enough reach out to them. We didn't engage the co-ops and communities. We, honestly haven't been as clear and as aware of the universe they operate in. So, I think we fixed that a lot. NCO right now is in an ongoing dialogue with co-ops and communities to talk about how to promote solar among their members. So we're, doing the flip because they know, just like the IOUs, just like Excel, that there is an enormous demand for solar from their members. And they don't respond to that. Co-ops and communities are some of the most democratic institutions in Minnesota. And they're going to hear, they're listening, they're getting the message that solar is important to their members. So they're going to meet that demand and we're going to help. And value solar is going to be one of the ways they do that. There are already a bunch of community solar gardens. They're coming through the co-op and immune system. And you're going to see a lot more on the floor. So I'm actually pretty excited about the opportunity for that. Dustin?
Jason wanted to know if you had your crystal ball and if you could see in the future, 5 or 10 years, if you saw the 1.5% SES growing beyond where it is now, if that was a reality.
Okay, I'm going to stand here and point out to the bleachers. We're going to beat the 1.5 before 2020. You know what I'm saying? So, part of it's going to be things like the co-ops and communities that aren't even part of the 1.5% are going to kick in. So, once that starts to chug along and you start seeing capacity and deployment, from that part of the SOE universe, that's going to really help us with that number. And, they don't even have to meet that. Because it's going to be whatever number, and, pretty soon we go look at the numbers and say, holy cow, we're already there. Let's go and push it up to 5 or whatever, 3%. I'm pretty confident because the things that we put in place to make the market grow, I think are really going to work. Could be wrong. We'll see. I could be here in 2 years and people are going to say, remember when you said, and hopefully, I can say, well, I predicted right again.
Well, my question is this goes back a few months when we had election of community solar gardens. Mean that if to invest in it, you get something back for your investment?
Yeah. That's part of the pitch. I know we got companies in the room that are people who represent companies that are out marketing solar gardens. And that's one of the angles, is to look at this. I think it's a little tricky. We have to be a little careful about how to pitch this thing as an investment. But, it's one aspect of what people are doing.
What's the timeline from this year, from now, from the PUC work to the XL coming forth with value solar to, I know there's a certain number of days that everything has to, are there going to be solar gardens up and running this solar installations?
Good heads. This guy's head is going this way, and I'm going, I'm going to agree with Dustin, but, because yesterday they went and made a decision. The PUC didn't even make a decision until March 31st. So they did it, 2.5 weeks earlier. And then the utilities, based on their timeline, are supposed to come back with their number in 30 days. Now, originally that would have been the 1st of May. Now, middle of April, they may still give a little bit of grace period because I'm sure the utilities are going to go, we'll figure it out in 30 days. But, you could be right. give them a little extra time, so sometime in the beginning of May, middle of May, we'll have some idea whether they're going to opt in or not. And then there's some logistical application, IT stuff that has to get put together by, let's say Excel. So, I'm estimating, and it's a little dangerous to do this, but I'm estimating that sometime June, middle of June, what do you think?
I would say, and the timer's ticking, it started. So
Yep.
all of these different components, the adoption of the community solar program, the 30-day time period for applications, the 60 days for application approval, 30 days interconnection. You start to stack all of these things and you give the maximum allowable time frame for these. I think we're looking at earliest installations will be fourth quarter of this year. And that's just taking into account if Excel consumes its full 60 days here, if they consume their full 30 days here, if they consume their full 15 days interconnection, then you've got lead time for equipment material. You start to put all these different things into a chronological time span. Yeah, we're looking at October, November. It's going to be tight, it's going to be close.
Well, I think, there's a difference though, and, part of what I heard you asking wasn't just when they actually be, moving dirt, or boots on the roof, but how much certainty are we going to have so you go out and market? And, I think we're going to be more like a June. That's where I was coming from, Dustin. That, you could go to subscribers and say, this looks like it's going to be your price, for the next 25 years or, whatever. Or go to the finance institutions and get them to help with financing and then go to the subscribers. That was the most important part for us is we have the ability to go out and market, sometime early in the summer.
Even though installation might be in the spring.
Right, exactly. You got to go able to talk to people, like our friend Marty Mulgrew says, across the kitchen table, and explain to them, what it's going to be. One more question.
Actually, it's just one last comment. All the incredible things that you've heard Lynn here speak about today, I think it needs to be understood. There was really a 4-year pathway to getting to this. And, I remember it's the Solar Works for Minnesota Coalition, every other Friday, meeting at the Sierra Club, and it was putting all the right things in place. And the back part of the story that often doesn't get talked about is between 2010 and 2012, we lost a lot of our legislative champions. Kate Newt was out, John Dole was out. We had changes across the board and lost a lot of our institutional champions within the legislature. And part of the backstory was just having to go out through greater Minnesota and do in-district meetings, trying to find out where can we get support, who are these newly elected candidates, what do they know about this, can they stand competently at the Capitol in front of their peers and articulate the technical and the legal part of what we want to get passed. And so I just want to sum this up with a huge thank you to Lynn, who spent tireless nights and did an incredible amount of work for Mencia, and was just relentless at the Capitol. And days that I know were 13, 14-hour days, I got to go home, and Lynn was still banging his head with a lot of other people at the Capitol, in and outside the halls, getting the language tweaked. So thank you, Lynn, and I think you deserve a round of applause.
There are moments I'm going to walk away from this stage here, but I kid people sometimes that I have the best job in the world. I get to go out and convince people that the sun is a good thing.
Well, thanks everyone.